Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadeshatarane Mukham Karoti Vachanam Pangum Langate Girim Yatkripathamaham Vande Shri Guru Tijatarane. So we will continue with our discussion of this very key and important verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.3.28, and in our last week discussion we had so it's not really a part of the verse, but the verse touches the first line, Etecham Sakalapumsa, Krishna Stu Bhagwan Swayam, and talks about the various incarnations of Krishna, and we took it as a separate subject, that what are the categories of incarnations and how do they relate to each other. So this is key understanding, I would say, as we further delve into Srimad Bhagavatam to understand the relationship between Krishna and his expansions or his plenary portions or his empowered incarnations. And again, we wanted to emphasize that this is not for the purpose of us trying to establish a grading system that this incarnation is more powerful than the other. They're all Vishnu Tattva. Most of them are Vishnu Tattvas. Shakti Deshas are not. But Vishnu Tattvas, they're all in the same category. But it helps us understand how Krishna expands himself and presents himself in so many different ways for achieving a purpose. So it basically helps us in understanding more our relationship with Krishna and Krishna's relationship with us. So today we will focus on a more contextual understanding of this verse. So as I mentioned, this verse is something that has attracted the attention of our acharyas for various reasons. So it is called a Paribhasha Sutra. This particular verse is called a Paribhasha Sutra because it is the most conclusive statement of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. The verse has been extensively commented on by different acharyas. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, Jiva Goswami, one of his sandarbhas called the Krishna Sandarbha is actually based on this verse. So he uses this as a foundation in one of his Sat Sandarbhas called Krishna Sandarbha. Rupa Goswami also talks about it in Laghu Bhagavatamrita. So, and Srila Prabhupada also, he talks about it in the purport. So we will look at it a little bit in terms of how the various acharyas, they churn this verse in order to help us develop a deeper understanding of the position of Krishna. So Prabhupada in the purport to this verse, he says, originally the Lord is full of all opulences, all prowess, all fame, all beauty, all knowledge, and all renunciation. When they are partly manifested through the plenary portions or parts of the plenary portion, it should be noted that certain manifestations of his different powers are required for those particular functions. So Prabhupada is explaining why does Krishna have so many categories of incarnations, because they suit a particular function. And Prabhupada explains this through a very nice analogy. He says, when in the room small electric bulbs are displayed, it does not mean that the electric powerhouse is limited by the small bulbs. The same powerhouse can supply power to operate large-scale industrial dynamos with greater volts. Similarly, the incarnation of the Lord displays limited powers, because so much power is needed at that particular time. So this is Krishna responding to the demands of the time, place, and circumstance and manifesting accordingly. So if you remember, we had encountered another verse in our study of the Bhagavatam so far that we had also tagged as a Paribhasha Sutra. So does anybody know what is that verse number and perhaps what the Sanskrit for the verse is? Okay, so this is a verse that we studied in the second chapter, and this is the 11th verse. Vadanti tattva tattva vidas tattvam jnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagwaniti shabdayate. And at that time also we had mentioned that this is one of the two Paribhasha sutras that appear. And one may ask that by Paribhasha means definition. So one may ask that why are there two definitions in the same book? Because the Paribhasha Sutra by nature defines the subject of the book. But the two of them are related in terms of details. In the first Paribhasha Sutra, in 1 to 11, we are presented with the three aspects of God. That how is God perceived? As Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. In this verse, the position of Bhagwan is defined. That who is the basis of 1 to 11? What is it that is presented in these three, or that is perceived in these three forms? So, so we'll delve a little deeper into the analysis of this verse that is done by Srila Jiva Goswami, and a little bit into how Rupa Goswami deals with this verse, but not in that much details, but some. Jiva Goswami will be the primary mode of our study. And we will then deal with, in Vaishnav Nyaya, or in Nyaya in general, the way that the people who follow logic make a point is that first they make a point and then they will speak about all the apparent contradictions to that point. So they take the role of themselves opposing the point and then they address those contradictions. So that way it is complete. Otherwise, if somebody is simply making a point and walks away from it, then they leave themselves open to people coming and say, but I see this fallacy. I see this apparent contradiction. And then it leaves the logic a little bit incomplete. So Jiva Goswami does this, that he will make the point, he will give all the evidence that supports this point, and then he will switch to the other side. And then he will say, but I see all these contradictions that come in my explanation. And then he addresses those contradictions. So it's very wonderful to see how a person of the stature of Jiva Goswami, who is obviously a genius, is not only so much immersed in bhakti, but also so much in technically making sure that the position is unambiguous. So Jiva Goswami begins by analyzing the verse from word by word. He begins by trying to analyze this verse. So he says that the word ete, and this is of course the same as what Srila Prabhupada gives in his word to word, but Jiva Goswami tries to establish some context to it. So, so he says that the word ete means these, cha means and could also mean etc. So, ete cha, in this context, it refers to the 22 incarnations that have been listed by Srila Sutta Goswami in the previous set of chapters. And before them, Sutta Goswami had spoken about the 3 Purushavatars. So he uses the word ete cha to indicate that it's not, this verse does not only refer to the 22 incarnations, Leela avatars that were enunciated, but it means etc. So this is an acknowledgement of the verse that came just before that, that the Lord has millions of incarnations. Just like there are rivulets flowing, waves in the rivulets, the analogy is given. So the Lord has millions of incarnations. And Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he calls out many prominent incarnations that are actually not called out. And this is just in one particular yuga. If you expand it to a manvantara and the day of Brahma, then there are literally millions of incarnations. So ete cha means these and others. So not only these 22 incarnations, but others. Amsha. So ete cha amsha. So amsha means part. It means section or portion or part. Ete cha amsa kala. And kala means opulence. So when we were studying the various kinds of incarnations, so if you remember, there were incarnations that were in the category of amsha, and then there were the third category, which was the avesh avatar, and the avesh avatar are essentially kalas. So kalas are basically when Krishna empowers jiva with some of his opulence, whether it be for knowledge or vairagya or bhakti. So they come in the category of opulence. So he says ete cha amsha kala. So all these incarnations that have been spoken and others are either kala, which are either amsha, which means that they're plenary portions, or kala, which means they're empowered. By whom? Ete cha amsa kala pumsha, of the Purushavatar. So this verse comes at an appropriate time, because just before this, Sutta Goswami has spoken to us about both. He has spoken to us about the Leela avatars. He has spoken to us about the Purushavatars. So the point he's making is that I've just spoken to you about the Purushavatars and Leela avatars. I have also indicated that other than that, there are many other incarnations. Now I am saying that all these Leela avatars and others are either amsha, portions, or kala, opulences of the Purusha. So Purusha, as we know, is the Vishnu avatars. So ete cha amsa kala pumsha. So what does this line mean? That all these incarnations are coming from Lord Vishnu. In order to build our faith in this verse more so Jiva Goswami says that there are 6 standard ways of analyzing a text, and he says one of the 6 ways of analyzing a text is to see if the opening and the closing statements are in resonance with one another. If they make the same point. Now, this particular verse is not the last verse in the chapter, but what Jiva Goswami is saying is that since we are at this verse, at this point, this is including a concluding section of the chapter. And again, when we have divided the chapter in section, this verse concludes a particular section in the chapter. And 131, which is the first verse in the third chapter, is Jagrahe Paurusham Ropam Bhagwan Mahad Abdvi. This verse says Itiche Amsa Kalapumsha. So essentially they are saying the same thing. So there the statement again, Jagrahe Paurusham Rupam Bhagwan Mahad Abdvi, was basically making the same statement that from Paurusham is from the Purush avatars, the various incarnations appear. Here, Etache Amsa Kalapumsha, same point is being made. So he's saying this is one of the standard methods wherein we can say that because both the verses are saying that the incarnations come. Now, the interesting thing that Jiva Goswami wants to drive over here is, which is a little counterintuitive, he's saying that you have to understand these verses as saying that the incarnations do not come from Krishna, but they come from the Purusha. So Krishna is not the source of the incarnations. Krishna is the source of the incarnation. And why he wants to make this point, he will speak about it later. But using the logic that we have gone through, what Jiva Goswami has established, that all the incarnations are either portions, plenary portions, or opulences of the Purusha avatar, which is emanating from Krishna. So then the next point that he makes is that what about Krishna? Who is Krishna? So earlier when we were going through the list of the Leela avatars in 1323, Sutta Goswami had actually said that Krishna and Balram appear in the Vrishni dynasty as the 19th and the 20th incarnation. So based on that, we will well be in our rights to conclude that Krishna and Balram, because they are appearing along with the incarnations of Vaman Dev, Parshuram, Narad Muni, Vyasadev. So it may be valid for one to conclude that they are in the same category. So to refute this, Jiva Goswami, he refers to the Purva Mimamsha. So Purva Mimamsha is one of the six nyayas, or which talks about logic. So there's Uttar Mimamsha and Purva Mimamsha. So both of them, so they're more about karma, but they also talk about logic. So he quotes from Purva Mimamsha, and he says Purva Mimamsha presents a logic that a later statement is more powerful than a previous one. And then he illustrates with an example. So he says that if a person goes to another person and says, "Give me a glass of water," and the person says, "Okay," and then he's getting ready to give him a glass of water, and then the person then says, no, give me a glass of milk." So what is the expected behavior from the other person? He will assume the second statement to override the first statement because they're coming from the same person. He'll say, "Okay, I'll give you a glass of milk." So similarly, the later statement. So earlier on, Sutta Goswami said that Krishna and Balaram are Leela avatars. Later on, he's saying that Krishna is Swayam Bhagwan. So by the logic of Purva Mimamsha, the later statement overrides the prior statement. Now, it does not mean that the prior statement is false. In the analogy, we can carry the analogy only so far. So in the analogy, it would appear that the man changed his mind. He said, "Water, no milk." But here, it's not that Sutta Goswami made an error and changed his mind. Why the later statement can trump the prior statement, Jiva Goswami will explain it in more details. Now, the nature of logic is that the logic has to be defined in the context that it applies. Because in this, by this Purva Mimamsha logic, Jiva Goswami is saying that a later statement will always trump the prior statement. But then later on, he says that the prior statement trumps the later statement if the prior statement is a Paribhasha Sutra. So the example is that the person first goes to another person and says, I drink water and water only, so give me a glass of water. And the person says, okay. Then later on he comes and says, give me a glass of milk. Now the second statement cannot be accepted because he had already made a conclusive definitive statement prior to that saying that I drink water and water only. So Jiva Goswami's contention is that if a statement goes against the Paribhasha Sutra, then one has to do one of two things. One has to either interpret it or one has to reject it. So, so right now, he's saying that by virtue of the Purva Mimamsh, we understand that the later statement that is made by Sutta Goswami is trumping the previous statement. So while we accept Krishna and Balram as Leela avatars, but we also understand that the definitive statement is that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I'll just stop here for a minute and see that if there are any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Achyuta. I'm just wondering, like, how is the Paribhasha Sutra defined? I mean, I know that it is what you mentioned was it defines the subject of the book, but I'm just wondering, like, how, like, because these two verses, especially the Bhagavatam, the 1:1:2 and the 1:3:28, these two are not like next to each other or one behind the other. They're like in different chapters and everything. So like at least I know from Bhagavad Gita that there's three shloki Bhagavad Gita and then there's chatur shloki Bhagavad Gita. At least they are like these verses are like together and combined and they form a context and it gives so there is at least some relation, but when these verses are like so for in different chapters and further apart, I'm just wondering how or how is it or who defines these?
Okay, thank you. That's actually a good segue into what Jiva Goswami speaks. So you're kind of thinking like Jiva Goswami right now. So having established or having introduced us to the importance of the verse as a Paribhasha Sutra, so his next attempt is that what makes a statement a Paribhasha Sutra. So Paribhasha Sutra, we know what it means, that it defines the subject of the book, but what is the definition of the definition? What makes a statement a Paribhasha Sutra? There are 18,000 verses. Why have the Vaishnava Acharyas specifically picked upon these two verses? And given the other point that you were saying is given the fact that they are not co-located, appearing in different chapters. So in order to do this, Jiva Goswami, he gives us some insight into this particular statement, which is the second statement. So he is done analyzing the first line of the verse. Etecha amsa kalapumsa. He is done analyzing that verse, wherein he says that all these incarnations and plenary portion, etc., they are portions, plenary portions, or opulences of the Purushas. The second statement of the verse is Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam. And as per Jiva Goswami, this statement should be considered to be so he says the nature of the statement is that it is unambiguous, it is a declarative statement, it is absolute, and it is categorical. So he says it satisfies these four conditions. So it is unambiguous in the sense that if one reads the statement, Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam, There is no ambiguity about what the statement is trying to say. Declarative. That means the declaration is being made openly and clearly. Absolute means that it does not predicate itself on any other conditionality. So the typical conditionality that we see is developed from the context. That the context, the set of verses that comes up, they establish a context, and they so that's why many times when we are trying to understand verses, if somebody comes and quotes a verse, the first thing that we ask is, give us the context of this verse. Where did it appear? That if Prithu Maharaj in the Bhagavatam says, Jiva Jivasya Jivanam, one living entity is the life of another living entity, then sometimes people quote this particular line of the verse to indicate that the Bhagavatam supports meat eating. Because Prithu Maharaj, incarnation of Krishna, in the Bhagavatam making this statement, but then the first thing we ask is, what is the context? But a Shruti is absolute. It does not rely on the context. So anywhere where it appears, it will always carry the same meaning, that Krishna Stu Bhagwan Swayam, that Krishna, your God, and it is categorical. Categorical again means that it is unambiguous. So some of it is again beyond the scope of the discussion, because Jiva Goswami uses Sanskrit Nyaya terms to define the Shruti. So categorical is very synonymous to unambiguous, but my understanding is that in the original Sanskrit word there are subtle differences for which he is describing this. So the fact that this statement is a Shruti makes it more powerful than any of the statements that have been made in the past. Now, Jiva Goswami says that one may still say that why was Balram and Krishna maintained as noted as incarnations in the past? So Jiva Goswami says that okay, let's talk about it, because and I'm guessing he's talking about the contemporary philosophers. That apparently is one of the primary reasons why philosophers, they consider Krishna to be an incarnation of Lord Vishnu. So he says, I'm presenting this statement as a Shruti to you, as a Paribhar Sutra to you, that Krishna is Stu Bhagwan Swayam, but yet you are saying that Krishna and Balaram were spoken about as Leela avatars just few verses earlier. So he says, accept the fact that by Purva Mimams, a latter statement will override a previous statement. Accept the fact that this statement is a Shruti. So a Shruti is always correct. It's not relevant based on the context. So even whether it appears after it, before it, on the side of it, this statement on its own is always correct. And then he says you also have to note the fact that in the 22 incarnations that Sutta Goswami spoke about, there was only one time that he uses the word Bhagwan, and that is when he speaks about Krishna and Balaram. So even when Sutta Goswami is talking about Krishna and Balaram as part of the Leela avatars, only for them he uses the word Bhagwan. Now he takes the opposing side and says that, fine, I accept the fact that because the word Bhagwan is used in the verse, it makes this Krishna and Balaram stand apart from the other 20 incarnations. But the word Bhagwan is used for both Krishna and Balaram. So how can you say that Krishna tu Bhagwan Swayam? Shouldn't you say Krishna and Balaram tu Bhagwan Swayam? So Jiva Goswami says, true, technically Balram is not an incarnation. And he uses the analogy of well, he explains it based on what we studied in our expansions of Krishna, that Krishna, who is Swayam Rupa, then he becomes into Swayam Prakash, and Swayam Prakash is Prabhav and Vaibhav Prakash. So Prabhav Prakash is Krishna in Rasa Leela, Krishna in 16,000 expansions in Dwarka, and in Vaibhav he is Krishna as Vasudev, Krishna and Balram. So Balram is actually not an incarnation, but he is actually God himself. So he says, I would accept the fact if you want to include Balram in an incarnation. Even if you, so he says, it does not in any way take away the supremacy of Krishna. And then the second point that he makes, which is probably the most powerful point, he says is that if Krishna is coming as Swayam Bhagwan, but he's coming to fulfill the role of an incarnation, then it is not incorrect to consider him to be an incarnation. So when we were looking at the various categories of incarnations, then we actually, under the Leela avatars, the first category was under the Leela avatars, under the Amsha avatars, the first category was the Pravasta avatar. Under the Pravasta avatar, there was Krishna, Balaram, there was Lord Ram, Krishna, and Narsingadev, right? So at that point also we said that these three are considered to be special because they are the most powerful in terms of incarnations. And then amongst the three, Krishna is special. And if you remember, we looked at the logic that of Jaya and Vijay, that Lord Ram, so Lord Narsingadev, he killed Hiranyakashipu, but Hiranyakashipu was again born as Ravan. Then Lord Ram killed Ravan, and then he was again born as Shishupal. When Krishna killed Shishupal, then he achieved liberation. So which means that Krishna was able to do something that the other incarnations were not able to do. So Rupa Goswami uses that to make that distinction. So he says that if somebody is displaying symptoms that are very close to something else, it is not inappropriate to also associate them with that even though it is not exactly their position. So Krishna as Swayam Bhagwan, once in a day of Brahma, descends. And Jiva Goswami says because he descends, you can call him an avatar. He comes as the son of Yashoda Mai and Nand Maharaj. He takes birth and he performs his pastimes. He does what a typical avatar does, which is Sambhavave Yuge Yuge Paritranaya Sadhuna Vinashaya Dushkrita. So he is doing whatever a typical avatar does, but he does more. He does his Vraj Leela, he associates with the gopis. He does some more which only Krishna as Swayam Bhagwan does. But he's also doing the role of an avatar. So he says it's fine. Because Krishna is acting in that role, there is no harm in calling Krishna an avatar. So Sutta Goswami did not make a mistake. He did not make a mistake because of this affinity of the role that Krishna was playing. And also the fact that in all the other Mahayugas, Krishna does not come as Swayam Bhagavan. So the statement that he makes is actually So the statement that he makes will actually be true in other than the 28th avatar. The statement will actually be true. Okay, then in analyzing the second line, I'm getting this line for some reason.
We can see too.
Hmm?
We can see the screen, but this is the next verse which you kept it, 31st verse.
Okay. So the next line is that he wants to now analyze is Krishna's tu Bhagwan Swayam. So he says that the most important word in this line is tu, and tu translates to but. So he says that it is a pivotal word that signals to the reader that what is about to come is different from what has been spoken. So the chapter was speaking about incarnations. This particular line is speaking about the source of the incarnations. So Sutta Goswami uses the word Krishna's tu to say, I have spoken to you about so many kinds of incarnations. Krishna's tu, but Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan. So the tu is indicating, as per Jiva Goswami, the beginning of a new definitive statement. And he uses again the logic that because this statement has tu in it, it is a definitive statement, and therefore it fulfills the requirement of a Shruti. So the second line of the verse is called a Shruti for this reason, and because it's a Shruti, it trumps any other prior statement that has been made. So Jiva Goswami now he's explaining that if you look at the construction of the verse, the third line is not linked to the second line. So Etecha Amsa Kalapumsa Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridayante Yuge Yuge. So he says that the second line stands separate from the other three lines. The third line is actually pointing to the first line. The third and the fourth line are pointing to the first line. And he says why? So one reason he gives is because of the use of the word tu. Tu indicates that this line is deviating not only from the context that was built in the chapter, it is also deviating from the context of the verse. So if you look at the first, third, and the fourth line, they're complete in themselves. That Etecha Amsa Kalapumsha, all these incarnations are plenary portions or opulences of the Purush Avatar. Indrari Vyakulam Lokam, whenever there is disturbances that is caused by the enemies of Indra, Mridayante Yuge Yuge, they come to take care of it. So that is the purpose of the Leela avatars that come from the Purushas. So we know the Purush avatars, they take care of Sarga and Visarga. Mostly they take care of the primary and secondary creation, and they also participate in the ongoing maintenance. But the exclusive purpose of the Leela avatars is Indrari Vyakulam Lokam Mridayante Yuge Yuge. So Jiva Goswami gives two reasons to support his point that the second line of the verse stands separate from the other three. The first reason was the use of the word tu, which is a signal from the author that this is separate. The second is that he uses a more grammatical line of reasoning. So he says that Krishna is singular. In Krishna's tu Bhagwan Swayam, Krishna is singular, but the third line, which is, or rather the fourth line, which is Mridiyante Yuge Yuge, and the third line, which is Vyakulam, they are plural. The verbs are plural. So then he says in Sanskrit, the subject and the verb must agree both in gender and in number. Here they do not match in number. Krishna is singular, Mridyanti and Vyakulam are plural. So it makes sense that Krishna's tu Bhagwan Swayam is taken as separate. So we can illustrate this by an example. So the example is that I might say that the king is a pious person. The subjects of the king are all immoral. He must be followed at all times. So the proximity affinity is between the third and the second line. So I'm saying that the king is a pious person. The subjects are all immoral. He must be followed at all times. So the proximity affinity of the third is to the second line, which may lead one to say that you must follow the immoral subjects. But if you look at it from a different way, that the king is a pious person is a singular statement. The subjects are all immoral. That's a plural statement. And then you say he must be followed at all points, which means that you're again pointing to a singular statement. So in the course of a conversation, one will automatically correlate the third statement with the first statement and assume the second statement to be standing on its own, to be separate. That the king is a pious person, the subjects are immoral, you must always follow him. So one will automatically say that one is saying that you must almost always follow the king. So that is known as syntactic and semantic affinity. So because the third statement is talking about a singular person, the first statement is talking about a singular person, they have syntactic affinity. The syntax binds them together. Semantic is that the other person will naturally assume that you have to do what is right. So you have to follow the king because the king is a pious person. Semantic affinity is a little weaker, but it also builds on the case. The king is a pious person, his subjects are all immoral, you must follow him at all times. So semantically, the instruction is that you must do what is pious. So similarly, in this verse, what we see is that syntactically, the second statement stands separate. Semantically also, the second statement stands separate because it's a Shruti. Because Jiva Goswami has explained that all the definitions of a Shruti apply only to the second statement and not to any of the other statements. So in this way, Jiva Goswami, he distills this verse, extracts the second statement and says that Krishna's tu Bhagwan Swayam, the presence of this statement in the verse makes this the Paribhasha Sutra. So again, I understand that this is a little bit, maybe a little bit or too much, I don't know, but it is technical. But again, it helps a lot for us to build our faith in the Bhagavatam. So I'll take a pause over here. So Jiva Goswami's commentary goes on, and we'll cover a little bit more. But I'll take a pause over here and see if there's any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. Gaur Sundar Das here.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances.
Prabhu, it's a little interesting to see Krishna, because in Krishna Leela, he shows as a Vasudev, 400 Vasudev form. He shows a Virat Roop. To Hanuman and Jambavan, he shows as Lord Ram when he meets things like that. So only in Krishna Leela he appears as many other forms, whereas if we take Ram Leela or any other previous avatars, the avatar is consistent. It doesn't show any other form. Like Matsya avatar, he doesn't show himself as somebody else. He has appeared before. He is consistent in his avatar, in that particular avatar. And even if you take Lord Balram, he doesn't even exhibit many other forms. He's consistent as Balram throughout Krishna Leela. I understand it is to reciprocate for different moods of the devotees, because some devotees want him to see as Lord Ram and some want to see as Lord Vishnu. But this is something I'm seeing as something very distinct in Krishna Leela. Maybe you can comment a little bit on this.
Thank you, Prabhu. It's a good point. I was thinking while you were speaking, and you're right, that as far as my memory goes also, this particular Leela is unique in that way. And it's also unique in a way that this is the only Leela in which Krishna comes as Swayam Bhagwan. So that is why we see that there is Krishna as Swayam Bhagwan, who does not bother himself with anything else other than enjoyment. So I think it is in Garg Samhita that that it is explained that even when Krishna was killing demons in Vrindavan, it was Vasudev Krishna who was killing, because Krishna in his original form, he does only one thing, which is Anandmaya, which he enjoys, and that could very well be the reason why we see this various form that Krishna, when so Garg Samhita gives a little bit more, I would not say esoteric, but it gives a little bit more more detailed answer to your question, that how when Krishna appears in Dwarka, then he's Vasudev Krishna, and that's why he manifests the four-armed form. And when he goes to Gokul, then the original Krishna is already there. Vasudev Krishna merges into the original Krishna, and when Akrura takes Krishna back, then just before exiting Vraj, Krishna and Balram take bath in the river, and at that time the original form of Krishna and Balram stay back, and the Vasudev Krishna and Balram expansion go. So we see that over here, and again this is the subtlety that is more exposed to people who are studying it in slightly more details. For the majority of the explanations that are given, there is no distinction that is made between Vrindavan Krishna and Dwarka Krishna. But it in a way it goes to the point that that there is the Krishna Swayam Bhagwan who is appearing. Sharang Prabhu is also making this point that Krishna is Rasa Raj, other incarnations are not. Do you want to expand on that a little bit, Prabhu? Okay, that's okay. You may. So that's my understanding, Gaurasundar Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. I had one more question if you have time, or I'll wait for somebody else to ask.
Okay.
I have one more also.
Yes, Ajuta Mataji.
So Prabhuji, I just missed the 4 parts about Paribhasha Sutra. You mentioned unambiguous, absolute, categorical, and the 4th one was?
So
Declarative.
Declarative.
Thank you, Prabhu. And also one thing, you mentioned 6 ways to analyze um, a text or a context. So one was like the opening and closing statement should say the same thing. Are we okay to like discuss the other 4 or 5, or should we wait?
It's a very good point. Jiva Goswami doesn't speak about the other 5 over here. I was also curious to know that what are the 6 ways to analyze it. So either he assumes that one who's reading the Sandarbhas already knows it, or because he has limited space, he does not talk about it. So I don't know. I mean, at least in the Krishna Sandarbha, it does not talk about it.
Okay, bro. Thank you so much.
Okay, Gorsan, did you get your question or?
Yeah, I have my question. I was just waiting for somebody else if they have anything.
Okay.
Or if you have time, I can ask.
Okay.
So my second question was about Lord Balram. He's also interesting in the sense that he's simultaneously same as Krishna, that means Supreme Personality of Godhead, but he's also known as Adi Shesh, and literally the word Adi Shesha means the original servant. Adi is original and Shesha is servant. According to what I heard so far, both Supreme Personality as a master and also original servant.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the right understanding, Prabhu?
That is the right understanding. That Lord Balram is the most complete servitor of Krishna, and I think at one point the question was asked that what about Srimati Radharani, and the question was that she is also the most complete servitor of Balram. So they're both most servitors, but yes, that is the position of Lord Balram, that he serves Krishna in all the possible rasas.
And simultaneously, he's also a Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yes. So there was an article. Okay. There was an article in Back to Godhead some time ago, and if you search it, you'll find out is the title was something like God as the servitor, or the servant God and the servitor God, and that was basically all about Lord Balram. That how he is the personality of Godhead, but he is also the most perfect servant to the personality of Godhead. So if you look at it, if you look at Balram Tattva a little bit more, you see that in the spiritual world, other than Krishna, everything is Balram. He is the fountainhead of all the incarnation. He is the fabric of the spiritual world. He is maintaining all the services are coming from him. One of the meanings of Shesha is that when everything finishes, what remains. So Shesh also means remainder. So Lord Balram is that when even if everything is destroyed, everything goes away, what remains? Lord Balram. So Lord Balram is he's the closest to what Krishna is, but the currency in the spiritual world is service. So everybody is related to Krishna in the mood of service. The greater the person is, the greater is the person's service.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, thank you for your question, Prabhu. Okay, so carrying on. So Jiva Goswami, in order to disprove his own statement, he analyzes the Bhagavatam, and he comes up with 15 statements in the Bhagavatam which do not support the notion that Krishna is Swayam Bhagwan. Now he doesn't give what the 15th statement is, but he says altogether there are 15 statements of this sort. In many places, Krishna is not referred as Swayam Bhagavan. These statements refer to him as an incarnation of Vishnu, or an incarnation of the hair of Vishnu. So for those of you who don't know, there is the popular understanding that Mahavishnu has had a black and a white color hair, and they incarnated as Krishna and Balram. So Jiva Goswami then he says, why shouldn't I consider these 15 statements right and the one under discussion to be mere glorification? Why not consider Krishna's to Bhagwan Swayam just praise of Krishna? After all, Krishna is the topic. So he is glorified at first, so that people will have faith and listen to this Puran. But in reality, Krishna is not Swayam Bhagwan. Therefore, we should interpret this statement in the light of those statements which are many, whereas this is only one. So he is trying to contradict himself, and now he answers this objection. So first he says is, where is your objection coming from? Is it coming from statements within the Bhagavatam or outside the Bhagavatam? So first let us consider conflicting statements within the Bhagavatam. So in the first chapter, Sutta Goswami was asked 6 questions, and in the second chapter, Sutta Goswami answers the first 4. In the third chapter, he answers the remaining 2, and in doing so, he will give a list of the incarnation. So Jiva Goswami says, up to this point, no ambiguous statement about Krishna has been made. No ambiguous statement about Bhagwan has been made. Then at this point, this verse comes where it clearly states that Krishna's tu Bhagwan Swayam. Now after that, there are many other statements that appear which seem to say that Krishna is something other than Swayam Bhagwan. But the logic by which a scripture is written, that once a sutra appears, it will override any other statement that comes after it, because the purpose of that scripture is to expand on the sutra. So the point that is making is that the purpose for which a scripture exists is summarized in the sutra, and if you look at it the other way around, the sutra is expanded by the scripture. So once the sutra has appeared, then that sutra is standing as the foundation of the scripture. There may be other statements that appear later on in the scripture that may appear to contradict the sutra, but they cannot factually do, because they will go against the purpose of the scripture itself. So then he says that we have already established that Krishna's tu Bhagwan Swayam is a sutra by evaluating it by those characteristics. So then he says, let us examine what kind of a sutra is it. So he said, if a topic is unknown and then the sutra makes it known, then the sutra is known as a Paribhasha Sutra. So Paribhasha means definition. So he's saying if a topic is not known and the sutra makes that topic known, you should consider that to be the defining sutra. It's the definitional sutra. He says up to this point in the Bhagavatam, the topic of Swayam Bhagwan has not been defined. Now Vyasadeva says Krishna's tu Bhagwan Swayam, which makes this a Paribhasha Sutra. So we can understand now that we are dealing with a statement that is a Paribhasha Sutra. Then Jiva Goswami says that a Paribhasha Sutra is universally applicable. It does not need to be repeated because its universal application is implicitly understood. If there is any statement that goes against the Paribhasha Sutra, one should either reject it or one should interpret it. So he leaves it open at that point, saying that I have established that Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam is the Paribhasha Sutra. The other 16 places where it seems to go against it, the reader needs to, and of course he's not asking us to reject it, he's saying that one should interpret it. What is the context in which it appears? So in this way, Jiva Goswami, he deals with conflicting statements that are appearing within the Bhagavatam. So now he says, what about conflicting statements that are appearing outside the Bhagavatam? The Devi Puran, it basically glorifies Durga Devi as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Shiva Puran, it glorifies Lord Shiva as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he says those statements might well be the Paribhasha Sutra in those particular scriptures. So why should we accept this and reject those? So in order to support that, he says that let's go back to Tattva Sandarbha. So Tattva Sandarbha is the very first Sandarbha that he wrote. He said, let's go back to Tattva Sandarbha, where we looked at all the scriptures that are there. In that we evaluated all the Purans. And we said that we should accept the Puran in the mode of goodness to be higher than in the mode in passion, and those in ignorance. So we know that there are 6 Purans in the mode of goodness. And then he said, when we analyze those Purans, we have also established that of these 6 Purans, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the topmost Puran. And then, if you remember, we did the same analysis that he did. We followed Jiva Goswami's analysis that because the Srimad Bhagavatam is spoken by Vyasadeva, written by Vyasadeva in his maturity, because it's a natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, because it's a Mahapuran talking about all the 10 subjects, because it's in the mode of goodness, therefore we consider it to be the highest level. So the point that he makes is that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the Emperor Puran. And when an emperor returns from a victorious campaign, he goes on a victory parade, and at that point, everyone turns out to see him, even his former rivals. People come to see him who have no direct relationship with him, but they are there simply to attend the parade. In this way, they honor and acknowledge the emperor's supremacy. They become like ornaments to him. Similarly, the Bhagavatam is the Emperor Puran. The statement Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam is the Emperor statement in the Bhagavatam, and therefore it defeats any rival statements within the Bhagavatam, and the Bhagavatam defeats any rival scriptures within the Vedas. So he says the presence of this statement stands supreme, and the presence of any rival statements should be considered to be like the parade that comes to attend the king. People in that parade may be friends or enemies of the king, but at the end of the day, they all become ornaments to the emperor. So he makes this point that even the statements that present conflicting views are actually ornaments to these statements. So in concluding his analysis, and I won't go much into this because it's fairly verbose, but he says that if you set aside all the rules of Nyaya, grammar, logic, etc., people speak, people relate to where their heart is. And he says that the most prominent canto in the Srimad Bhagavatam is the 10th canto, where there are 90 chapters that are devoted to Krishna. Right from the opening of the Bhagavatam, Krishna appears, and he stays right till the end of the Bhagavatam. Then he says, not only in the Bhagavatam, but if you read the other Purans, there is always deference to Krishna. And then he goes in further amount of details. But the point that he establishes is that there is a subjective affinity. If you keep aside the nyaya and the logic and the grammar and all that, the fact that everybody is naturally attracted to speak to Krishna. Even when they're glorifying Lord Shiva, they will speak about Krishna. Even when they're talking about Durga Devi, they will speak about Krishna. And he says that should give the reader the understanding of the superlative position of Krishna. So that ends the analysis by Jiva Goswami on this verse. Ete cha amsa kala pumsa Krishna astu Bhagwan Swayam. And like I said, there is in Laghu Bhagavatamrita, there is a more compact analysis that is done by Srila Rupa Goswami. So it appears that Rupa Goswami was one of the spiritual masters of Jiva Goswami. So Jiva Goswami appears to expand upon it, and of course he does put a lot of rigor in his analysis. But I won't go through the analysis of Rupa Goswami. Sufficient to say that it is very similar, but a little bit more compact to that of Jiva Goswami. Rupa Goswami also speaks a little bit about how the two Paribhasha sutras correlate with one another. How 1 to 11, Vadanti Tattva Tattva Vedas, and 1-3-28, which is Krishna's to Bhagwan Swayam, how do the two correlate to one another? And he uses the explanation given by Lord Kapila in third canto, 32 chapters. So Lord Kapila is also speaking Sankhya, and he uses that to correlate the two. Again, I'm not going to go into that because firstly, it will become too exhaustive, and secondly, I do believe that it's beyond the scope of even though we are doing Bhakti Vaibhav, I do believe that it's beyond the scope of that. So I'll end this verse over here. What I would like to do is in the next 6 minutes, what I wanted to do was do the next verse, which basically brings us to the end of this particular section of the third chapter. So from next week we can start the next verse. But before I move away from this verse, I'll just take one more pause and see if there's any other questions, comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. It's not a question, but it's a comment. As you said, then when we compare to other Puranas like Shiva Purana, Devi Purana, I'm a born Shaivite, but when I analyze each and every shloka in those Puranas, talk about even Krishna there. So that is mentioned as we read through those shlokas to this stage.
So my understanding is in Shiva Purana, isn't that the pastime of where Lord Shiva gives benediction to, so there was the demon, right? He was cutting strips of his flesh off his body and putting it in fire. And then he got the benediction that if you put your hand on anybody's head, the person will die.
Yeah.
And then finally, Lord Shiva takes the help of Krishna to.
Yes.
So that is one example that is quoted. Another example that is quoted is that of Lord Shiva's battle with the demon the Tripurari demon, right? The one who had 3 cities, and whenever he fought with Lord Shiva, he was a match for Lord Shiva until Krishna, he came in and he entered into Nandi and into the Trishul of Lord Shiva. And then Lord Shiva was able to defeat the demon.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, but yeah.
Right. So at least to my mind, these two instances are given in Shiv Puran, where Lord Shiva is relying on Krishna for help. Now in the Bhagavatam, we have the Sagar Manthan, right, where Lord Krishna is relying on Lord Shiva for help to take the poison. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he makes this point that Krishna taking help from Lord Shiva is Krishna glorifying his devotees there. It's not need based, but it's voluntary.
Well,
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.
One more question, Prabhu. So in ISKCON, we are all basically followers of Mahaprabhu and Mahaprabhu's associates. And we have Krishna Leela, and we have Gaura Leela, and we have Goloka, and we have around Goloka, we have Navadvip in the spiritual world. And we see that some of the acharyas like Narottam Das Thakur, they desire to worship Radha Krishna, whereas some other devotees, acharyas, they glorify Mahaprabhu and associates more than Radha and Krishna. So the bhav is different for different acharyas. So coming back to this verse and trying to superimpose on our parampara, which is primarily Mahaprabhu's associates, and also putting in the context that Mahaprabhu and Krishna are one and the same, they are non-different. It looks like it is confusing to put everything in terms of this verse, because this says clearly that Krishna is Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, and in our parampara specifically, we at least the desire for most of us is we want to go back to Mahaprabhu. That is Navadvip, not in Krishna Leela. So how do we reconcile this verse and our parampara?
So if I understand your question correctly, what you're saying is, if the verse says Krishna is to Bhagwan Swayam, how do we accept that we seem to be working under the assumption that Chaitanya to Bhagwan Swayam?
Exactly, Prabhu.
Okay. So, so in a way that's a fairly straightforward concept for us to understand, that the personality of Krishna in a certain mood is called Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in the Adi Leela, that point is made explicitly, because then it expands into Chaitanya Tattva. But there that point is clearly made, and this is right up in the Adi Leela first chapter. And if Ravi Prabhu is there, he can speak about it. But right up there, the point is made about the fact that there is non-difference between the two. So just like we, or I'm sure you also, have more than one names. You have a certain name that perhaps your parents call you, perhaps you have a certain name by which your spouse might call you. Does not in any way impinge on your singularity. So similarly, Krishna, is called Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but the personality is still the same. The second point in terms of mood, and that's where it gets, to be honest with you, it gets a little bit beyond the scope of my able to address it correctly. All I can do is quote to you this very similar question was asked to Bhakti Charu Maharaj, and in terms of what happens to those who worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu but not Krishna. And Maharaj answered that they go and they go to both places. So you cannot worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and not worship Krishna. So they go to both places. They are in Navadvip and they are in Goloka. They're associating with Krishna and they're associating with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he did not explain beyond that point. He did not give the Shastric references. I'm sure if he's saying it was based on some Shastric reference, but that's the extent of my understanding to that question.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so then we'll do the last verse for the evening. This is 1.3.29. Do you have that on your screen?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Janmaguyam bhagavato yaitat prayato nara sayam prata grina bhaktya dukha gramad vimuchyate. Whoever carefully recites the mysterious appearance of the Lord with devotion in the morning and in the evening gets relief from all miseries of life. So this is the Falstuti. So we'll see that over and over in the Bhagavatam, that they have glorification, and then after the glory of a great personality, and then they will have the Falstuti, that what does one achieve out of this. So the Falstuti of reciting the Leela avatars. So the Purusha avatars, the Leela avatars, the Etacham Sakala Pumusha, the Falstuti of that is that one gets relief from all miseries of life, which is another way of saying that one goes back to the spiritual world, because everywhere in the material world there is misery. So one of the words that Sutta Goswami uses over here is Janma Guyam, mysterious. So what is the mystery? At one point, Jiva Goswami earlier on has said that the statement is clear and unambiguous and categorical and declarative. Krishnastu Bhagwan Swayam. Now he's saying that one who understands the Janma Guyam Bhagavata. And the point that he makes is that understanding Krishna is accepting the fact that you will never understand Krishna. So we understand Krishna to the extent that he reveals himself to us, but we will never be in a position to fully understand everything about everything that Krishna does. And some of the examples that are given is that Krishna is unborn, yet he takes birth. There is this mystery. Why does the unborn take birth? So which is the verse in Bhagavad Gita which says that Krishna is unborn? In chapter 4, we have this verse, the 6th verse, Ajo apisa navyatma. That Arjun says that even though I am unborn, I take birth again and again. Then Krishna is the cause of all causes, yet he appears to wait on others. So like we see that Krishna did not come to annihilate the miscreants until the Devas went to him. So one might say that the Devas are the cause of Krishna's action. But yet we say is that Krishna is Sarvakaran Karana. So how can the cause of all causes be driven by other causes? That is a mystery. Krishna is everywhere, yet we cannot see. So in 13th chapter, verse 14, Bhagavad Gita, Sarvata Pani Padam. Everywhere are his hands and feet, yet we do not see him. That is the mystery. Krishna is appearing before us as the deity form, yet we do not accept him. In the 11th canto, 47th chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna says, whoever develops faith in me in my form as the deity, worships me in that form. So Krishna himself is saying, I'm not different from my deity, yet we are not able to accept it. Krishna is feared by fear personified. Right? In the first canto, first chapter, 14th verse, Yad Viveti Swayam Bhayam. that he is feared by, fear personified. Yet, we see that as soon as Krishna is born, he tells his parents, let me run away from Kamsa, otherwise Kamsa will kill me. He runs away from Kamsa in fear. In the battle with Jarasan, he runs away in fear from Jarasan. He gets the name Ranchor. In Braj, when he's a child, when there is thunder and lightning, he runs to his father in fear. Yet Krishna is Yad Vibheti Swayam Bhayam. Very fear personified is fearful of Krishna. Krishna is supremely moral. Dharmam tu sakshat Bhagavad Pranitam 6.3.19. Yet he does so many apparently immoral things. He steals, consorts with the wives of others. How do we understand that mystery? Krishna is the most opulent. Ishavasyam idam sarvam in Ishopanishad. Yet he dances for a palm full of yogurt. So the gopis say, if you do dance for me, we will give you one palm full of yogurt. And Krishna very enthusiastically dances. And this is the person who's Ishavasyam idam sarvam, that he owns everything. Krishna is the master of all mystics. Yogeshwara tatomitvam. Bhagavad Gita. Yet, when Agasur follows his friends, then Krishna becomes bewildered. For a moment, he is bewildered. Krishna knows everything. Vedanta krit vedavid evachaham. Yet, when Nand Baba is doing the yagya for Indra, he starts preaching to him karmimamsh, that this is what you should do. So, how can we understand all these mysteries? So, this is one. So, Sutta Goswami says, one who carefully recites the mysterious appearances of the Lord. And the point here made is not just the appearances, but everything about Krishna is mysterious. His appearance is mysterious, his Leela is mysterious, even his disappearance is mysterious. Right? But then what does the word that Sutta Goswami says? One who carefully recites the mysterious appearance of the Lord with devotion. So how does the mystery get solved with us? Because we believe that Krishna can do everything. Between the Brahman and the cobbler, we are the cobbler. When Narad Muni tells us that Krishna is passing an elephant or a camel through the eye of a needle, we say, Acha, Krishna can do that. Right? So that's why Sutta Goswami says, with devotion. So he has given us all this very, very elaborate Sankhya, this very elaborate analysis about Krishna. Jiva Goswami has embellished on that, but then he says with bhakti. The most important component is bhakti. So can anybody remember a verse in the Bhagavad Gita that makes a very, very similar point that is being made in this verse? In fact, the words are also repeated. Janma guyam bhagavato ya etat prayato nara sayam prata.
Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvata.
Yep, very nice. Yes. So this is the 4th chapter, 9th verse. Janma karma chame divyam yo me veti tattva evam yo veti tatvata. Yakta deham punar janmam nete mahameti. So Arjuna. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activity does not upon leaving the body take birth again, but attains my eternal life. Very similar, a very similar point. Srila Prabhupada has a very, very nice purport. All his purports are nice, but this is very nice in the sense that Prabhupada does very similar to what Jiva Goswami does purport. That why are people bewildered? Because in the Brahma Samhita, and this is Prabhupada, I'm paraphrasing, but point Prabhupada said, in Brahma Samhita, Lord Brahma says Advaitam Achutam Anadim Ananta Rupam. Lord Brahma is saying that he is Achutam Anadim Ananta Rupam. That he is not different, inconceivable, Anadim Ananta Rupam. No ends, no beginning to the number of forms that he has. Then Prabhupada says that in the Purush Bodha in Upanishad, it says Eka Deva Nitya Leela Nukartu. Bhaktya Vyapi Hridyantaratma. That this one person is doing all these so many leelas. And why? Because of his relationship with so many devotees. Prabhupada said, despite all this, despite the fact that Krishna is Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadim, Anantarupam, despite the fact that his Nitya Leela Anukrato, one is not bewildered. Why? Because, and then Prabhupada quotes this verse from the Shvetashvar Upanishad, that Tam eva vidvati mrityumeti nanya panta vidyate ayanya. One can attain the perfect stage of liberation from birth and death simply by knowing the Lord, the Supreme Personality of God. And there is no other way to achieve this perfection. So, Prabhupada says, after looking at all the complexity, all the mysteries, all the mystic in Krishna's appearance, pastimes, disappearance, simply by knowing that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one will attain the perfect stage of liberation. And this Upanishad goes further to say that there is no other way to achieve this perfection. So driving back to the same point that this verse is making, that one with a simple heart, if one accepts Krishna's supremacy, then one is assured of success. So this is not to say that the previous verses should be ignored. The reason they are there is to build our faith. This verse is also at the junction of the next set of verses, which are even more philosophically, which have the propensity or which have the potential of confusing us even more philosophically, because they will talk about Krishna as the Brahman and Paramatma. So this verse is at the junction of it. But the point is making is, in your heart, accept Krishna as the personality of Godhead and then read these verses. It's like Prabhupada saying in Bhagavad Gita, accept Krishna as God and then read the Bhagavad Gita. And then you will really understand what the Bhagavad Gita is. So Prabhupada has a lecture on this. And for those of you who have the Veda base, I don't have the time to read the snippet of the lecture, but a lecture on this verse, and Prabhupada gave it in Los Angeles in October 4th, 1972. It's a lecture on this verse where Prabhupada talks about the practical application, but very similar to the point that I made, but in his own characteristic style. He's very direct, saying that the only way, he says, the verse is prayata. Prayata means try. Don't get discouraged that you're not perfect. You will never be perfect. Prayata means constantly try, constantly endeavor. And what is the component of that endeavor? So the verse says Sayam Prata. Sayam Prata means 2 times at least. And Prabhupada then correlates it with the chanting of the Gayatri, which is Yam. But he says that one should try and read or engage at least twice a day, so that and again Prabhupada direct. He says if you don't do it, you'll fall down. So he's saying do it in order to protect your spirituality. So this ends this particular section of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and we will start with 1.3.30 next week. I also have with me a collection of verses distilled from the Veda scriptures that point to Krishna's supremacy with respect to Vishnu, with respect to Devas. I will send that to Prem Kishore Prabhu, and then Prem Kishore Prabhu can disseminate those verses.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Vancha kalpatarubhayascha sindhudevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo Koti Vaishnavin ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. By God, Hare Krishna.